on from last following on from last night's Helm talk, tonight we're just going to be focusing from a cruise perspective, sailing in the GP fleet, with class focusing on getting over 20 all-female boats at the next Worlds at Skerries next summer. We'll be sharing our top tips and how we go about crewing the GP and what it entails. And if anybody hasn't got their mute button on, now's the time to mute. And if you've got any questions for us in the chat box, that'd be great. Michelle's picking those up. And we're going to start with a brief intro, just in case you don't know who we all are. So if we could start with Mel.
Hello, everybody. I am Mel Morris. So I have been, for those who don't know me, I have been around sailing for most of my life because my mum and dad, Curly and Anne, who you can see, sailed GP14 together when I was a kid. So I spent a lot of time as a kid around the boat parks at GP14 events. And then I got into sailing myself. I started off in Optimists and sort of did that, and then moved on to sail mostly single-handed actually first. So I did laser 4.7s, laser radials, a bit of Europing, and then got into team racing when I started, well, towards the end of university. And that got me hooked on team racing. And shortly after that, I started sailing with Ger Owens, who I still sail with in the GP. So we've been in the GP now for about 10 years. And we've won a couple of Irish national championships, and we were the first mixed team at the last Worlds in Mounts Bay.
Fab. And Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz, and I started sailing, I think I was about 9 or 10, and it was all through my auntie and uncle, who then went on to sail around the world. But they took me along to the local sailing club, and that's where it all started for me, really. I started sailing with my uncle. He used to encourage me to sail Tuesday nights with him, and I helmed. And then I just started sailing with other people within the club, and then doing the circuit. I think I did my first nationals when I was about 15 with Terry Edwards from South Staffs. And then I sailed with various other people. Then I met Mike, and I made him sail with me. And then had the children, and I've done a couple of years sailing with Jim, and in the middle of it all I did a bit of Merlin sailing, and that's how it all came about.
Brilliant. And Michelle, how about you?
I started sailing kind of similarly as a kid in Mayo Sailing Club, which is on the west coast of Ireland, really just pottering around. Like, it's kind of gorgeous place to live and sail, and some racing, a little bit of racing at the club, cruiser racing, a little bit of dinghy sailing. And then it was like Mel, going to college, did team racing and loved team racing, and that kind of led to some enterprise sailing, and then a little bit of SP20, and similar to Mel, I would have done quite a lot of Wilson trophies and Worlds and Enterprise Worlds. And then just after I had Rory, I live in Sutton and in Dublin, and then I hooked up with Katie, and so we've been sailing together for the last 7 years in 2 different boats, and I've just had a great time. I've had a great time in the GP, and have sailed pretty well as well, and have got better, all the time, and have really enjoyed it. That's kind of where I'm coming from. So a bit different.
Fab. And I'm Jane Kearney, if anybody doesn't know me. Hi, and I started sailing when I was 16, a bit late into it, but my dad sailed forever, and I went down the sailing club and someone asked me to crew, and that was it. I was hooked. Did all the plasmen eyes, which are, one of the best things I've ever done as far as improving quickly, helming and crewing. And then I did my first nationals, Mounts Bay 99, when I was about 16, crewing, and then helmed in 2001. And then so I was in the chandlery business for a long time, so I got to sail with lots of people, lots of boats, Larks, and one of my other main fleets, and RS 400s. I do a lot of, but the GPs always had some of the best class racing. So that's the fleet that I always come back to and, you know, have done the most in myself. So let's kick off. We're all crews, which means there must be someone else in the boat with us. If you had one thing to say about choosing someone to sail with, what would you say? If we go Mel again, we'll start with you.
I guess my rule is usually choose somebody that you like sailing with, because sometimes you'll have good days and bad days, but at least if you get on with whoever you're sailing with in the boat, it won't be totally miserable. And my other thing is, maybe it's quite useful to sail with an Olympian. Top tip.
Liz, what advice do you have choosing someone to sail with?
Well, I generally choose to sail with people that, I quite like, but I think the biggest thing for me is I have to feel safe.
Yeah.
If I don't feel safe, then it's not a good start for me.
I think that's quite similar to a lot of, not sexist, but a lot of females seem to have that thing a bit more, don't they? We do.
Yeah.
Some of us do like to feel a bit more safe. And Michelle?
Someone you get on with, and that you have the same kind of outlook as, that you know, whether you really want gunning to win, or whether you just have fun, but I think you both have to have the same goals, I suppose, you know, to get out of this, because you're spending a lot of time together on a boat. You know, it's all like Mount's Bay was full on, like all day. And in between, you know, you have races where you're chatting, and it mightn't be about sailing. So I think that would be definitely my number one thing as well, similar to the girls.
Yeah, I would say for me, I've always been a bit of a nutter and just sailed with anybody who asks me. I will sail with anyone. If somebody says, do you want to go and sail a thing at a thing, I'll be like, yes, I'll do it. And I think the safety thing for me has never been a thing, because I can swim, so worst that can happen is a capsize for me. I know that a lot of people don't, you know, do like to have safe, but I've been quite lucky with who I'd say lucky with who I've managed to sail with over the years and the experiences that I've had. But yeah, for me, I just sail with anyone. But the GP has had a history of being predominantly male. But now there are lots and lots of female crews, female helms as well. Liz, you've been in the GP fleet, one of the longest that I know of. How old were you when you started sailing the GP, and what made you want to get into this brute of a boat?
I read that earlier, and I think I was about 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And it was David and Anne, my auntie and uncle. They joined South Staffs, and they took me along. And I used to go to weekend events with them, because it was just my mum, and they kind of used to take me off for little adventures, bring me back burnt more often than not. But yeah, and then I think why I stayed in it was, you know, along the way I sailed with my uncle, so I was sailing with family. I enjoyed doing it, made lots of friends at the local sailing club. But then I was lucky, and I managed, you know, I sailed with Johnny Sinclair for quite a long time, Justin, Mike, Jim. I sailed Potsy and the Merlins a little bit, and I did do a bit of larks and enterprises. But I think for me, the GP was just, it felt like home. It's what I'd always done, and it was natural. So it didn't feel like it was a challenge or it was too hard a job. It was kind of like, it was easy, but probably because I'd done it from so young and it was just ingrained in me. Yeah. You know, the little things that other people might find hard, tacking, pulling the jib in. It's all timing, and you know, I got that from an early age, and that's why I stuck with it, and I still enjoy it.
because a lot of people, a lot of females would definitely think that GP might be too big for them or too heavy, and you're not that big, you're quite small, petite, really.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's good to know that it doesn't really matter what size you are. If you want to do it,
Yeah,
you can do it.
I
There's a
remember
will, there's a
someone
way.
saying to me when we got the lark, oh, you'll find it much easier. And do you know what? I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't find it easier. It was what I was used to, and you can get used to doing anything. So yeah, I think if you want to have a go, then you have a go. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. We're going to also cover some of the things we do as crews before we even step in a boat, to give us every single advantage to do the best we can at events. Michelle, from our little group chats before, you've got lots and lots of things that you do. So if you could go through a bit of your pre-event preparation, just to give anybody any advice or tips that you have on that.
Similar to Liz, I'd be very light as well, and so would have to have extra, I suppose. Fitness will be a huge thing for me, just to keep fit, whether it's running, spinning, spin classes, cycling. I did an awful lot of that when I was team racing, and then continued on, obviously. And that kind of, I think that that gives you something in your arsenal when you're, we'll say, you know, tacking, or when you're just off the start line, or when you're going around marks or on ley lines, you know, that really, that's definitely something that, like I said, is in your arsenal. So, you know, you have control of that before you even start a race, that's something you have. Also, we had a checklist before every race, or before every, we'd go out at all, we'd have a list of things that we'd go through, both of us, like from our watches to our flags to make sure we had our lunches, is the kite rigged correctly, and we both look at it so that there wasn't anyone in particular to blame, that we were both, you know, in this together. What else? Also, we did an awful lot of repetition, like just training out in the water, going around marks. I think, Mel, you mentioned this, yourself and Ger would have done quite a bit of this as well.
Not so much, in the kind of over in the team racing as well, and then it's the time we put in then is sort of like stayed with us in some ways. The benefit of it, thank goodness, stayed with us sort of all the way through. But whenever we started sailing together, we'd have spent a lot of time just like choosing 2 marks close together in Dunleary Harbour and going around them 10 times clockwise and then 10 times anti-clockwise, and things like that you don't have to think about it, and that muscle memory does stay. And we have less time for training now, just because we live at different ends of the country and we both have young family. But that, I think, once you put some of the time in, then it doesn't take so much time to get back into the swing of it.
Yeah.
So we would have done that a lot. It's a bit different in team racing because there's no spinnaker, so we kind of had to learn a whole pile of new skills, but that's okay as well. Yeah.
But similarly, we'd have done similar things like in Sutton, just hoisting and dropping kites, and making sure we knew what position we were in, whether it was jibe to reach jibes, or run to run jibes, or run to reach, or whatever type of jibe it was, that we had a specific position. And it generally was to do with the transfer, our weight, you know. So and it's going back to what Liz was saying, that light people can sail GPs, because I definitely was someone who would not have considered it, only for it was a local boat to us in Sutton, and like I said, Katie just approached me just wanting to sail something that was easy to sail, it was local, and again, going back to having families, that it was handy, it was a short commute to the sailing club, easy to get out, and that would be something that would have been huge for us. So that's I would say the fitness for me, and having a checklist before you race would be probably 2 of the big things pre-race that we would do.
Yeah.
Can I jump in and say, because one other thing you talked about lighter crews, and it's not always the case, but usually anyone with a woman on board, whether it's one of you or 2 of you, quite often you're just sailing with a bit more weight. I mean, Ger is quite light, so we are definitely one of the lighter crews, and have put in, and the whole time we've been sailing GPs, we're always trying to find ways of setting up the boat to make a difference. And we've experimented with a lot of things. So some of the stuff that is stuck, and I think, I'm not saying we invented it, but one of the things that is stuck has been ratchet blocks on the Genoa sheets. Make sure you can turn them off when it's light winds, but that can really help in the wind, just to get the Genoa in kind of and sort of cleated, and can help with uncleating as well. Then for the last Worlds, we experimented that year with using a white sail instead of a Kevlar sail, because again, in the windy weather, it's a little bit more forgiving. So we sailed the entire season and the last Worlds with the traditional white sail. And I know that Dad in the heavy winds will use that too. It just seems it doesn't knock the boat about as much. So it's just a bit more forgiving. And then we've experimented with other things like, I'm sure you've tried it too, there's lots of wind, bring the centerboard up a little bit. I know we've tried, I don't know whether, different things will work for different people. Sometimes if it's really honking, we might drop the main halyard a tiny bit and then pull all other controls on. So it's almost like a little mini reef in the sail, just all sorts of things just to try to get it to work for us, and these are things that, they do make a difference, and wouldn't necessarily do them all the time, but we've played around with that. So that's something you can do before racing, and get your boat set up for you and how your weight and how you sail.
Yeah.
And similar to Mel as well, we would have had we've kind of tried a few different kite systems that to suit us, because the first one we had definitely was very tricky for a light crew, because the people who had it before us, it was kind of built for two pretty heavy guys. So we've fiddled around with a few things and have definitely got something that works for us. So I think it is definitely worth doing that. Going out, trying different things and seeing what suits you for your weight and strength and whatnot.
And I know, Michelle, you were saying that you actually had a coach, you and Katie, before, was it the Worlds? You had the coach just to come out after you've done a lot of practice and then come and fine tune.
And I think that's something else worth doing. And we kind of got up to a certain standard, and then we had a coach. We had one kind of just the two of us, just the coach and ourselves, and that was really worthwhile, because it was only a short little coaching session, but he was able to spot things, and he was able to he was able to show us afterwards, and that's really worth it. And it doesn't have to be for a whole day. This was a Friday evening after work for 2 hours. But I think it's important to get to a certain level before you bring a coach on, I would say. But that was invaluable before an event like a Worlds, for sure. Yeah.
I know my best ever, well, not my best ever result, but I remember feeling the most confident in a boat after a Plasmena as a youth, where we'd been sailing all day, every day with coaches looking at us. And you go into an event with that confidence, that little bit of more reassurance that, your boat stuff's good. You can't change what happens on the water with other boats. You know what you can do as a boat.
And I think going back to we'll say to the checklist or the fitness or what Mel was talking about, the setting up your boat, there are things you can control before you go sailing, because there's so many factors when you go out racing. You can't control other boats, you can't control the water, but you can control your fitness, you can control how you've set up your boat, you can control things like you have your lunch, all those things, the practical things. And so at least mentally, when you go out, you have those, right, I have that, and all I have to do now is race and hopefully get a good place.
One of my big things I like doing before an event as well is a lot of times the events are on the sea. I like to check the tide times. I like to check the weather predictions. A lot of the time, it could show a big shift coming in, and I can be watching out for that when we're sailing, and things like that. For me, I like to know, or even chat to a local. You'll always find Ross chatting up some local in a bar, trying to find out any weird little things that happen at some of these some of these locations that we go to. So just other things that you can. It doesn't matter what happens on the water. There are things that you can find out before and have and know. Just to, that's what I'd say as top cruise in a way. Like we probably all well, I know all of us do that. We all are prepared before we even go sailing. We don't just rock up.
Hugely.
Yeah. Having helmed and crewed and owned lots of different boats over the years and worked for Chandler's, I'm just going to go through a few things that I do to the boat leading up to the season and the event. Just again, extra things that you can do to be prepared for your event. And I would check the boat every time I go sailing. I would check, you know, bungs, settings, anything like that I would check, but I would always get the boat hull only, upside down, give it a polish. For me, mentally, I like to know that my boat is clean and fast, like the hull is prepared and no nicks in it, no bumps or scrapes. I always check all the ropes, make sure there's no wearing out, nothing's fallen off, all the screws are tight, all the shackles are there, all things like that, again, that you can do before you go sailing. And if you come off the water, this is another thing that I would do, is always make a list of anything that's niggled me while I've been sailing, that didn't work quite right, or that wasn't smooth. I'll make a list of it and make sure it's fixed before the next time I go sailing. I mean, some of you leave that to the helms, that's fine. I like to get it done. But going into on the water sailing, the fun bit, Mel and Liz, all of us, but I'll direct this to you guys. You both mix it up at the very top of the fleet. You know, some of your results have been fantastic, and can you just let us know your secrets, what information you know, and what do you go through with your helm to make sure everything runs smoothly when you're out on the water? Crew input.
It's a funny one. When we were talking about this a little bit the last couple of weeks, just doing a bit of prep, it struck me that both Liz and I maybe were a little bit the same, and that we thought, bit of a misconception, that we thought we didn't actually know very much, but actually then we realized that we do. And so one of my kind of tips, or one of the things I've even realized myself in that, is that I'm not saying that this is true of all women, but I'd say that a lot of women sailing there, whether they're helms or crews, that you should take confidence, because you probably do know more than you think you do. Yeah. And another thing we talked about was the whole idea of knowledge is power, and that feeds into it as well. And taking confidence in what you do know, and making sure that you do know some of the crucial things, like where the course is, where your first mark is, and all of that. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add on that kind of point.
I think we talked as well about like knowing some of the very basic, like the basic racing rules, like a mark rounding, to know your rights, just to add a mark rounding, or pre-start as well, you know, because that can be, sometimes I think people can get caught out there. And again, going back to what you're saying, Mel, knowledge is power, you know, just to know those things. I mean, yeah.
Those, we said, didn't we, one of the biggest things, and where championships and races have been won and lost, is quite often, and it still happens now, even way into the championship, is the finish lines. Yeah. If we're on the sea, people don't always know how we're finishing and start to go off in a different direction. And there's been quite a few occasions that I've been in a position where that's happened around us. So that's just one thing to just know about before. And you always question yourself when you get to that point. But if you've read it over and over again, you'll be pretty sure in your mind what the right thing to do is.
Yeah. And you know the people that are going wrong as well, don't you? You can see it. If somebody's ahead of you going the wrong way, you're like...
And there's no gun, and you're behind them thinking, oh, I'm really glad I stuck to my gut instinct and we did it, because you can pick, you know, there's been times you can pick up 2 or 3 places, and when you're at the top of the fleet, that's wherever you are, that's quite a big thing.
I remember doing the youths with you, Liz, back at Southport years and years and years ago, obviously. And do you remember we won that race? And John Warburton was in the lead. and we won it because we'd read the racing rules and knew where to finish. Do you remember?
Was that at Southport
That was
or
at Southport,
Baltic?
yeah. Not at Southport 24 hours, a youth champs, but
Okay.
I remember me and you had actually read the rules and knew where to finish.
Well, we'd probably been told the rules, hadn't we? But yeah, but we still knew them.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, was trying to think, Jane, of other sort of top tips. And one of the things we haven't talked about this, but I wondered, I was interested in finding out whether when you're all tacking, do you face backwards or forwards? Because I know that there's a mixture among the fleet. I always face backwards when I'm tacking.
Backwards,
Yeah.
It's because of where the sheets are. It doesn't. You couldn't do it the other way. Like,
but some people do, because
Really?
I've seen them. Yeah. So just thinking stuff like that. It's I just thought that might be something worth mentioning, because I have seen some people tack facing forwards.
Because maybe they've sailed other boats where they've normally tacked forwards.
Yeah.
Actually, I hadn't even noticed that, and I'm probably tacked backwards courtesy of team racing.
Yeah, me too.
You know, yeah, but I hadn't even looked to see. I assumed everyone did.
I suppose going back to Lizzie's and all of us, probably it's ingrained into us how to sail. If someone's always tacked facing forwards, it might be the opposite. It might be really hard, but yes, definitely tacking backwards makes a big difference to speed. And also, I was always told you've got to keep eyes on the helm for your weight balance as well.
Well, you can see what they're doing, so it's invaluable. And at the start, I would always be facing backwards as well. And I know that that's a bit more controversial because some crews are watching for the line. I don't. I'm sort of more focusing on that stage and what the boat is doing. And so it means that I can see if we're about to do a jibe or attack. I don't have to be told. So it takes that sort of line of communication away.
Same here. I'm always facing backwards at the start, unless it's really light wind.
We were talking as a group about, again, on input, what we talk to our helms about, because crews are invaluable. Like we run the show basically, without us, helms wouldn't know what they were doing. So we talk about obviously checking our systems. The kites are on the right side, the poles, everything pre-start is ready to go. Everything's tidy. Nothing's going to get anybody in trouble, trip up. And I was on the starts as well. Liz, what do you tell Mike on the starts? Do you count him down and give me information, or?
I count down, tell him how long he's got. I'll tell him who's around us, if there's boats to leeward, boats above us, if there's any gaps. And depending on where we are in the week, it'll be telling him where everyone else is.
Does he ever ask you specifically for people, or is he just wanting to know the whole? Does he ever say, like, keep an eye on these boats?
Yeah, sometimes towards the end of a championship, he'll want to know where certain people, but more often than not, they're right by us. But another thing we do before, I don't know if anyone else does before the start, and I'm not really sure what the men do, but we always do a couple of beats to check the compass, and to check that it doesn't change too much.
Do you ever make a note of those, or is it just all in your head?
I always have to make a note. I won't remember which was which side, but so we always jot those down, and probably when we're sailing out, and then when we're nearer the start, we'll check it again, just in case there's any like massive shift and we're really at the wrong end of the line. That's something that we check.
Obviously looking for dark patches, gusts. I
don't do that,
no, but fleet, I know a lot of a lot of people, a gust could be a big hit for some boats, especially if you're sailing like Michelle, quite light. And
we would have to definitely look out for gusts, because Katie would have to spill, or like that we would put up the centerboard a little bit, or it would definitely impact us for sure. So we would look out for gusts and probably count them in as well, when they're coming in. But one
of the things in all of that, and how because I think some Jane, you're saying yourself that some helms really like lots of information, some don't, and it's something that you kind of work out. And I was just in general, and not just on communication, but on some of the tasks. Like there's some things in the boat that you have to do if you're a crew, and you have to do if you're if you're a helm. So if you're a crew, you have to put the pole on. There's no other way around that. If you're the helm, you have to steer. That's kind of the job description. But there's a lot of things in between that could be done by either of you, and some things will suit others. Different systems will suit different teams differently. So when we talked about pre-race stuff and pre-event, but that's something to work out, and work out what each person is doing and then sort of stick to that. And I think that's probably one of the secrets of building a successful partnership, is just working out what your role is. And it will be different, maybe from boat to boat, between different teams. I mean, I've sailed with Ger for over 20 years, which is quite frightening. So it's one of those things I don't really think about sometimes because we have been sailing together for so long. But that's probably, one of the secrets is that we do know what each other is doing in the boat.
I know when I sail with Ross, he always likes, he sails by percentages quite a lot, which is why I think he always does better in bigger fleets. The bigger the fleet, the better he does. And he's a different person to sail with, but he likes to know where the majority of the fleet are. So when you're sailing, that's a big thing for him. It's not just, oh, we're the only people out this way, then I'm not doing it. It's not safe, it's a risk. He would want to know always where the majority are. That's the fleet you want to cover, that's where you want to be. So sailing with him, that's the information he would want, and I found that really valuable as a helm. I've took that almost as a way, that's how I sail now, is fleet percentages, which I'd never really heard of before him. So that's my top tip, is don't go on it alone. If you're going one way and no one else is, probably
there's not anything you can do, is there, when you're out on your own and you watch everyone go past you? And if you're sailing in the middle of the fleet and it's a big fleet, then that's got to be the best. If you could pick up 6 places or lose 20, I'm sure that's the better option.
You always want clear wind, but there's clear wind and then there's ringing the bell on the wrong side of the course. So what else have we made a note of here?
Looking out for boats around you. You don't want to be doing turns up a beat to lose places if you don't have to. It's just and one of the things I found a lot of is a lot of people mid-fleet maybe, they're very, very hot on the starboard rule, and will shout starboard at you, even though if you tacked there, it might not be the best for them. So it's also making those kind of calls with your helm and saying, do we actually want this person to tack? If we're on starboard, but do we want them to tack? Is that going to help us out or not? And making those kind of calls and chats in the boat. Does anybody else find that? I don't think so. It's just you go out there and you don't want to be spending your spare time not enjoying yourself. So you go out there to enjoy yourself and have fun and come off the water less stressed than you went on the water. Hopefully there'll always be that odd day.
I think that goes back, I think
like
that
we've all said,
to choosing someone you sail with, that I think you have to be like-minded of what you want to get out of it. Exactly, you have to have the same ideas. I think it's hard if you have someone who really wants to win and like nothing but and someone who's like, listen, I just want to enjoy my free time, away from kids or whatever. They may not be a good pair. And I think it's people who have the same goals definitely sail well together, like exactly what you're saying.
And it's the basics, isn't it? Like we've all said, just making it easier on yourself, doing the little checks before the race, when you're sailing out to the start line, checking the front of the boat, tidy, there's not any knots, things aren't going to break, things are tied on. It's little things make everything easier for the whole race. If you just do that check every time you're going up a windward, when you're on a beat, when you get to the mark, that your twinner's on or off and the kite heads slightly out so it won't get stuck when they're trying to pull the kite up, the pole's in the right place, you can even put the pole on ready. It's just tiny little things all the time that everyone can do. They're not hard, just makes life so much easier. You don't want to get to the mark and then be in a panic or a flap, because quite often you're on that same tack for quite a while going into the mark, and there's lots of little things that you can do that can make all the little things a bit easier. And if you just do a few of them, I bet if you go out sailing on Sunday this weekend and you just take away 2 things and implement them, you'll find it easier and more enjoyable.
With sailing, it's always the person who wins, the person who's made the least mistakes. So it's eliminating those mistakes.
Yeah, and there's not many really that are out of your control. If you just, it's a little bit of time, isn't it? And it's just thinking ahead, I suppose, always thinking a tiny little bit ahead, because you know where you're going, you know what mark you're going to, you know where you're going next. So there's no reason to not be able to prepare for going around that mark.
Yeah. I was going to say the other thing that I've learned a lot of as well is the last beat, that attack defend. Going back to the actual input, cruise input, is attack and defend when you're sailing is who's behind you that can overtake you and who's ahead that you're trying to chase, and weighing up your pros and cons, basically. What's the biggest risk? Are you more likely to lose or gain? And as a crew, I always defend. I'm always telling the helm about all of their threats that are around them, and I'm expecting the helm to attack, to be trying to get more places all the time. We would do a lot of that for them, and I think that's everything that we've got, making sure we've got through everything that we wanted to tell you all. But Michelle, are there any questions?
Yeah, there's questions. There's what is the one thing a helm can do to make the crew's life easier? Anyone? Something that a helm can do.
I would say not shout.
I would say that too.
Yeah, that is probably it.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, shouting doesn't help. It takes
Shouting doesn't help
3 times as long.
Also, would it be when you simple thing, when you drop in the kite, try and go in more on a run. If it's a reach drop, try and give the crew a bit more time. If you go in a bit more of a run, then it's easier for the kite to come down. It's not such a struggle.
Yeah, and never say this has got to be a good drop. Never say those words.
Drop early. We would drop early as well, for sure, to make sure that we get that, we get round that mark. So yeah, that's it.
Another thing that can be useful again on windy days, if you're a lighter or just not so strong, particularly for a girl, if it's a close reach on a windy day, getting the pole on is so hard. So we would very often just head up a little bit longer at the windward to get us a little bit of room, so you can bear off a tiny bit to get the pole on. That's a really useful thing to do if you're not, 14 stone and like this. So
no, for me personally as well, when I'm putting the pole on, I find it a lot easier to put the pole on if the helm's got the sheet. If the helm's already got the leeward sheet, it stops the pole jumping around when you're trying to get it on the mast. So it is harder sometimes. It's a bit more pressure, but it is smoother. You know exactly where you're going with the pole. To get it on. I hope that's the kind of questions that you answers that you wanted.
I was it was me, Jane. It was Katie here who asked the question. So I've been watching the recording to make life easier for Michelle.
No, I was going, another thing, you mentioned it last night, Katie, was you don't always have to put up the kite, you know, especially us who are light. Like sometimes we'll go as fast without the kite than with the kite, and the palaver with the kite, you know. And I think there's always this feeling that it has to go up. But we have gone faster than people, you know, or they've capsized with it, and we've passed the kite. So it's not all about, you know, having to put up the kite. But
I agree with that.
But I helmed the Irish Nationals in Skerries, actually. Brilliant venue. Was it 2019, before all the madness, with Ollie? And it was absolutely howling on the Sunday. And I didn't put the kite, I saw people putting the kite up, and I did not put the kite up quite a lot of the times because, you know, one, I didn't want to capsize. I would lose a lot more places capsizing than I would have, you know, going for it. And, you know, going with the Genoa, and it was just madness. I don't think I could have held it.
I agree. We sailed at Nuki one year, and it was really, really windy. I was sailing with Jim, Mike was sailing with Chris, and we'd been neck and neck for the whole race, and it was really windy. And we got around the mark. I said, I'm not putting the kite up. And Jim went, sorry? I said, I'm not putting the kite up. It's not going up. And he said, well, Mike's going to put the kite up when he gets round. I said, fine, let them. And I wouldn't. I rebelled. Mike did, and they went swimming.
Yeah.
So sometimes, if you don't feel comfortable,
you're better off getting round.
It is, yeah. And I said, I just feel safe without putting it up.
So yeah, don't put too much pressure on your crews to put the kite up, Helms.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a similar question. What should Helms not do? What should they not do? What? Shout.
Yeah.
Shout.
Shout. I'm trying to think of one of the things. Ross does a funny grunty noise that's really horrible, and I never know if he's struggling with something or if that's just him, and it is usually just him. If he could not do that, that would be good. Mel, what does Jer do? You've not said anything nasty that Jer does.
Yeah.
I've been sailing with him for over 20 years. It's nothing. It's all good.
There's nothing he could change. He's perfect. We're all going to be fighting you for his crewing job.
I was going to say, so any ladies that are on this call need to sail with Ger, and then they'll love sailing.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
He's gonna, I'm trying to think.
The only thing, Mel, is if he was a woman, then you could be on all female crew. That's about all he could do.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, so the only other thing, I don't know if we want to wrap up, or do we want to chat about being a mom sailing? Because it is quite stressful, isn't it? We're all moms here. So what's the best thing about sailing as a mom, quickly?
We said free time, I suppose. But I think it's good as well that, like we talked about this, you're a role model, kids see you sailing, because it's quite a male dominated sport, and that females can go out and sail, and it's the norm. It's just, it's normal. It's what we do, you know, and it's the norm. And we said this rather than the exception. And so I really like that, the fact that, you know, our kids see us sailing, and that's it. That's what we do. You know, some mums go play golf or tennis but this is what we do. And I think it's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing.
I agree. My little girl, who's 4.5, well, 4 3/4, says when she wants to grow up, she wants to be a mummy, a sailor, a cowgirl, and a ballerina. So I'm cool with that.
That is great.
Yeah, I think, you know, being a mom and sailing, it's great because it's something that if you're at a nice venue, you can all be at together. And I think we've said before, you know, there's not many sports that you can enjoy both on and off the water, which you do get in sailing. So you can have a really hard day on the water, but more often than not, you'll come back, be mom, feed the kids, put them in the bath. Hopefully you'll have grandma or someone there and then you wander off back down to the sailing club, or as the kids get older, everyone goes back to the sailing club, and it's a social, and I think it's great to see. And I think Jill said it, your kids aren't treated any differently by the adults.
Yeah.
So the kids are all involved, which I think is really, really nice. And it's just a nice sport as a family sport, I think, because you can be at nice venues socially. They see you doing something that you love. Yeah.
And for me, it's actually getting away from the kids. I try every opportunity to get away from my children. So, so sailing for me is actually, you know, I like seeing the kids seeing me sail, but I don't want them to come anywhere near me whilst I'm doing it. You know, just I try and see who I can palm them off onto the most to get to go. So in fact, if anyone's free Sunday, I really want to go sailing. We're a bit short on babysitters. So.
Sorry, my mum and dad's cat has just walked into the shop.
Okay, so Jill, am I right to hand that over to you? We're running out of time.
Well, ladies, you know, Mel, Liz, Michelle, Jane, thank you for a fabulous talk. We've got so many top tips, pages of top tips, which is really good. Your talk really has been very enlightening and empowering, and it's just great to hear you so enthusiastic about the sport. So thank you very much for your time this week. You are busy mums and you do want to sail. Thank you so much for taking part this week. Thank you. So can I just remind everybody that there is a final talk in this series of for the Women's Festival, and that's on Thursday, 8 o'clock, and it is about supporting roles in sailing. And obviously the three talks this week have all been based around the fact that we are trying to encourage women to sail. Next year at the Worlds in Skerries, there is this new title of Women's Ladies World Champion. And to get that going, we really need 20 entries, 20 female, all female but entries. And it would be good, it's really great if we can encourage you all to sail. So once again, thank you very much, girls, and good night, everybody.
Brilliant session, everybody.
Thank you, really good.
Much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.